Imagine falling from the sky for miles down, trapped inside the severed tail section of a B-17 bomber with absolutely no parachute. Freezing winds tear at you, yet incredibly you keep firing your machine guns at the attacking German fighters in the freezing winter sky. This sounds like an impossible movie script, but it is the true documented story of a 21-year-old Wisconsin boy named Eugene Moran. Surviving a fall that should have pulverized him was only the start of a saga involving death marches and a secret radio hidden in walls. After surviving the crash, he fell into German hands who tried to break him with threats and long periods of total isolation in captivity. Moran said nothing, and finally, on December 14, 1943, the guards loaded him onto a truck with other prisoners of war. For 3 agonizing days, the truck traveled east through Germany as Moran sat in the back with 14 other American prisoners of war. His arms, broken in the crash, were still bound in makeshift splints, while a dangerous infection began setting into his severe head wound. Every single bump on that frozen road sent excruciating pain shooting through his broken ribs as the truck moved slowly through the snow. Finally, on December 17, 1943, they arrived at Stalag Luft III, a camp holding 10,000 Allied airmen behind wire. At the gate, guards ruthlessly searched each prisoner and stripped Moran of his dog tags and the few personal items he had left in his life. The barracks were an absolute icebox, where each freezing room held 32 men crammed into wooden bunks during the winter of the war. A single coal stove was supposed to provide heat, but the German coal rations were minimal and the prisoners suffered in the bitter cold. Each prisoner was given just too thin blankets, while temperatures plummeted to a bone-chilling 10 degrees below zero in the dark camp. Food was a constant obsession, and the morning ration consisted of a slice of black bread and a cup of disgusting burned barley coffee. Without proper medical care, Moran's broken arms began to heal incorrectly. The shattered bones fused together at wrong, twisted angles. Simple everyday tasks became insurmountable mountains. Tying his boots or holding a spoon became impossible, but brotherhood prevailed. Unbeknownst to the guards, the camp harbored a massive secret, a radio. It was a masterpiece of defiance assembled from smuggled parts. They hidden it inside a false wall in Barracks 14. Every night, selected prisoners would secretly listen to the BBC broadcasts. By morning, information spread like wildfire through the camp. In January 1940, the radio reported heavy Allied bombing. By March, news came of air attacks on Berlin, but every victory carried a heavy weight. More American bombers overhead meant more POWs. On March 20-4, 1940-, the camp erupted in chaos. 70-6 prisoners executed a daring escape through Harry. For over a year, they had been digging 30 feet below ground. The tunnel stretched a staggering 330-6 feet long. The escape lasted only one night before guards discovered the tunnel. The Nazi Hiker and mobilized a massive manhunt of 70,000. Within 2 weeks, they recaptured 70-3 prisoners. Under orders from Hitler, the Gestapo executed 50 men in isolated locations. Remaining 20-3 prisoners were returned to Stalag Luft III. Guards posted names of the executed men on the camp bulletin board. When prisoners read the list of the dead, a haunting silence fell. Security tightened and roll calls increased to a grueling 5 times. They banned movement after dark. Guards tore through every barracks in weekly violent searches, confiscating anything used for digging. Moran watched the nightmare from his bunk. His twisted arms were regaining some function, but he still could not work very effectively. His fellow prisoners shared their meager food and helped him dress. On June 6, 1940, the radio delivered news of D-Day. By the autumn of 1940, the Eastern Front was completely collapsing as Soviet forces pushed toward Germany. Russian tanks were 50 miles away, and on January 27, 1945, panic set in among the German guards. The march began at 4 in the morning in a blizzard with 10,000 prisoners forming columns on the frozen road. Each shivering man carried nothing but one blanket as the temperature plunged to a lethal 15 degrees below zero. The guards said they were marching west, but anyone who fell behind would be shot on the spot without any hesitation. Moran wrapped his thin blanket around his shoulders while the freezing air made every breath feel like inhaling glass. Death did not wait long, and on the second day, an American bombardier from Ohio collapsed face first into the cold snow. By the end of that horrific week, 23 bodies lay frozen as prisoners were forced to walk 12 hours daily. At night, they herded exhausted men into freezing barns or fields while the snow continued to fall on their broken bodies. Desperate men ate snow to stay hydrated. Undripped bark directly from trees to chew on as food was the only thought. Moran's feet blistered horribly, and he could feel the sickening squish of fluid and pus inside his boots with every step. Severe frostbite turned toes black, but men kept walking because stopping meant receiving a bullet from the German guards. Blinding blizzards reduced visibility to zero, but guards violently pushed them forward regardless of the deadly conditions. They passed like ghosts through abandoned towns, while civilians watched from windows as the German world was collapsing. German guards shot 3 men dead as they ran for the woods, leaving the bodies right where they fell as a bloody warning. But Moran kept walking after traumatized survivors simply stopped counting the frozen bodies along the road in 1945. His infected feet screamed with agony every time they hit the ground, yet he kept moving hour after hour, day after day. The deep rumble of Soviet artillery echoed behind them, while massive formations of Allied bombers flew heading east. Guards grew increasingly nervous knowing the war was lost, yet blindly followed orders to keep the prisoners moving. After 40-7 days of walking through an icy hill, the shattered column finally reached Bitterfeld on March 15th. Guards herded prisoners into an abandoned factory building, lying that transportation would be arriving very soon. As the heavy doors slammed shut, the prisoners simply collapsed onto the freezing concrete floor, unable to stand. Moran's feet had swollen to such a size that his boots were practically fused to his rotting flesh and skin. 3 agonizing weeks dragged on inside that factory at Bitterfeld while the guards brought absolutely no food. To survive, the prisoners hunted rats that scurried across the floor, roasting them over tiny hidden fires inside. Others chewed on the miserable grass and weeds that managed to grow through the cracks in the concrete floor. Moran's weight plummeted below 100 pounds as his ribs protruded sharply through his paper-thin skin. His face had become skeletal and his severely infected feet oozed constantly as he lay in the dark factory. A deadly outbreak of dysentery spread while men soiled themselves, creating an overwhelming stench in the room. German guards, repulsed by the horrors, stayed outside, bringing no medicine or bandages to help the dying men. On April 8, 1945, a sound broke the moans of the dying. It was the heavy thunder of American artillery. German guards became agitated, holding panicked conversations. Some simply disappeared into the night shadows under cover. American infantry entered Bitterfeld on April 10th. Remaining guards abandoned the factory and left the doors unlocked. Inside the factory, the prisoners were too weak to celebrate. They simply listened to the battle raging in the streets. They heard machine gun fire and tank cannons and the beautiful crisp crack of American M. rifles near the factory. At 2 p.m. on April 11, 1945, American soldiers from the 104th Infantry Division kicked open the doors. Battle-hardened troops froze at the sight of skeletal men. The putrid smell was so intense that several soldiers vomited. A brave medic entered and checked for pulses. When he reached Moran, the medic simply shook his head in absolute despair. The farm boy was still breathing, but his pulse was fading fast and his feet were gangrenous as his body was shutting down. Medics frantically called for stretchers to carry the shattered prisoners outside to a long line of waiting ambulances. During the transport, Moran drifted in and out of consciousness. He remembered American flags and he remembered crying. At a field hospital 15 miles to the west, Army doctors worked frantically through the night to save the freed men. When they finally cut away the ruined boots, they found his feet black with necrosis, making doctors consider amputation. In a stroke of mercy, doctors decided to try and save his legs, first instead of performing an immediate amputation. They pumped his body full of sulfate rugs and penicillin until his condition stabilized after cleaning the infected wounds. On April 13, 1945, he was transported to a much larger and better equipped military hospital in France. Slowly and miraculously, the lethal infection cleared up. By June, his weight climbed back to 120 pounds. His shattered arms regained most of their function, even though they remained slightly twisted from the improper healing process. Finally, on July 3, 1940, 5 military doctors officially cleared Eugene Moran for transport back to the United States. He boarded a massive hospital ship at Le Havre, and for 8 long days, he sailed across the Atlantic Ocean toward his home. On July 11th, the ship docked in New York Harbor. Moran stood silently on the deck as the Statue of Liberty came into view. The sheer weight of his journey was unimaginable. He had fallen for miles out of the sky, locked inside a severed tail section. He had survived 17 brutal months as a prisoner of war and walked 600 miles through a freezing winter at 21. As the ship docked at Pier 90, Army personnel gently helped the prisoners down the gangway while massive crowds cheered wildly. The national anthem blared over loudspeakers, and the young airman simply could not stop crying because he was finally back home. From New York, Moran traveled by train to Camp McCoy in Wisconsin, where Army doctors conducted exhaustive medical examinations. They documented every lasting effect, resulting in an 11-page medical report detailing his crushed skull and broken forearms. He suffered from chronic lower back pain caused by severe spinal compression, extensive nerve damage in both feet, and organ damage. Doctors strongly recommended 3 additional months of treatment, but Moran flatly refused because he just wanted to see his family. On July 25th, the Army granted him 30 days of leave, and he boarded a bus for Wisconsin, sleeping almost the entire way. And the bus ride took 2 days. He slept almost the entire way, his body still trying to recover its lost strength. When his family finally met him at the bus station in Soldiers Grove, the reunion was absolutely heartbreaking for all. His own mother did not even recognize him at first because the skeletal haunted man looked nothing like her young son. When she realized it was Eugene, she collapsed in shock, and his father had to catch her before she hit the hard ground. Moran spent that August 1945 at home, finding comfort in his old bed and eating his mother's home cooking. Neighbors visited daily, bombarding him with questions about what it was like and how he survived that incredible fall. He answered what he could, but some memories were simply too raw, like that spinning severed tail section. On September 1, 1945, he dutifully returned to active duty at Camp McCoy as the war finally ended. His official discharge papers arrived on December 1, 1945, and he separated with the rank of Staff Sergeant. His medals arrived separately, including 2 Purple Hearts for his combat wounds and the Air Medal with a gold leaf cluster. There was no medal designed to recognize a man who fell 4 miles inside a severed tail section while still shooting. At 22 years old, Moran returned to civilian life with no college education and no clear job prospects at all. He went back to the farm, planting, harvesting, and tending livestock, just as he had done before the Great War started. Everything felt different as he felt the aching weight of tools in his twisted arms and burning pain in his weak feet. He suffered from terrifying nightmares that woke him every night, and the sound of aircraft engines made him freeze. In 1947, he found a light in the darkness when he met a woman named Helen at a church social. They married 6 months later and eventually had 9 children together as the years passed by in peace and stability. Moran worked demanding construction jobs to support his large family, yet he never once complained about his lingering injuries. He never talked about the war unless someone directly asked him, keeping the dark horrors of the sky to himself. For decades, his incredible story remained largely unknown to the world, while his crewmates and the brave doctors vanished. The silence finally broke in 2007 when a local Wisconsin newspaper published a tiny and short article. The headline read, "Local veteran survived impossible fall," and caught the eye of a military historian named John Armbruster. Astonished by the claim, Armbruster drove straight to Wisconsin to interview the now 83-year-old Eugene Moran. Moran was living quietly in Soldiers Grove, where his 9 children visited him regularly after his beloved Helen passed. His hands still bore the unmistakable crooked dangles from his broken forearms, 64 years prior in the war. For 3 incredible days, Armbruster recorded everything, including the fighter attacks, the flak, and the horrifying for-mile fall. Moran spoke slowly, carefully unearthing details he had not discussed in decades about the death-marked captivity. He showed the historian his discharge papers, medals, war photographs, and a letter from his old navigator from 1946. Research led to the American Air Museum in Britain, which held records of the bomber Rikki Tikki Tavi. The records confirmed the grim statistics of the crew of 10, with 8 killed in action and 2 prisoners of war. Armbruster traveled to Germany to interview elderly locals who vividly remembered seeing the massive tail section fall. One man who was just 6 years old at the time recalled watching the metal beast crash into the forest from a shelter. Ulf K. Ack found the exact impact site where pieces of aluminum skin still lay buried in the earth 70 years later. In the year 2018, they organized a profound commemoration in Syke and invited all of Eugene Moran's children. 6 of his 9 children made the emotional journey to see the German forest where their father returned to Earth. The town erected a memorial plaque listing all 10 crew members in the very forest where the tail section landed. The ceremony took place exactly 75 years after the crash on November 29, 2018 in Germany. German citizens who saw the crash shared memories and expressed gratitude that the American gunner had survived. The children met the grandson of a Serbian doctor who saved their father and visited the old hospital in the city. Moran passed away on March 23, 2014 at 90, after living 69 years following the fall. His story survived against all odds, and John Armbruster published his exhaustive book Tailspin in 2022. The book featured photos of Moran in his 80s holding his Purple Hearts and the brave crew of the bomber. Engineers analyzed the structure of the tail to explain how he survived falling for miles out of the sky. The stabilizers and heavy guns created enough aerodynamic lift to significantly slow down his final descent. The violent spinning motion of the heavy tail section dissipated massive amounts of the lethal kinetic energy. Finally, the dense pine trees of the German forest acted as a giant natural cushion for the final impact of the tail. It was a perfect storm of aerodynamic anomalies, as without the stabilizers he would have plummeted like a heavy stone. Without the weight of the guns, the section would have tumbled uncontrollably, likely killing him while still mid-air. Without the cushioning effect of the pine trees, the impact with the ground would have been instantly fatal for him. Required 3 impossible factors, combining plus the arrival of Serbian doctors and the defiance of German staff. In the recorded history of World War II, only 3 men survived falling from a high-altitude bomber with no parachute. British tail gunner Nicholas A.L.K. made fell 18,000 feet into pine trees and deep snow during the Long War. American ball turret gunner Rallen McGee fell 22,000 feet, crashing through a glass roof of a train station. Then there is Eugene Moran, who fell 20,000 feet inside a severed tail section while shooting at fighters. He survived hell on Earth, raised 9 children, worked his farm, and lived to be 90 years old against all the odds. He survived the impossible, and his incredible story of courage will be remembered by generations for many years to come. His legacy is one of the most unbelievable sagas of endurance that has ever been documented in the history of the war. Eugene Moran was a true hero who proved that the human will to live can truly overcome the most terrifying situations. If you want more hardcore breakdowns of history, S deadliest miscalculations. Smash that like button and then subscribe. I'm your strategy observant. I will see you on the next battlefield as we uncover more incredible stories of war.